Welcome to the Beyond Sugar Freedom podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Dame, holistic nutrition coach and speaker. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode here on the Beyond Sugar Freedom podcast. I'm so excited today to introduce you to our guest, Bronte, who is here to really share her deep knowledge around thyroid health and probably some other fun things that we might get into in today's conversation. So before we dive in, I want to introduce all of you to Bronte. She is a naturopath with a passion for thyroid health and healing from a truly holistic perspective. She knows firsthand the multi-layered and challenging journey to heal from a thyroid autoimmune condition, having personally dealt with and healed from Graves' disease, and has devoted her life to healing on all levels. Her mission is to awaken you to remember how powerful you truly are, to actualize your potential as your own healer while living a life of contribution, fulfillment, and inspiration. Bronte is deeply passionate about supporting her clients toward what she calls whole self wellness, including not only physical challenges or changes required to heal, but also the powerful mindset shifts and emotional healing needed to unlock deep, profound healing and reverse dis-ease. She interweaves a myriad of modalities from her toolkit, which I'm so excited to dive into today. Things like EFT, NLP, family constellations work, internal parts work, and facilitates healing on a cellular and soul level to create space for required self-healing. Bronte offers individual 12-week one-on-one thyroid healing programs, as well as a 10-week group program where she guides you through the steps and tools that worked for herself and her numerous thyroid clients in that healing journey. So there we have it. Bronte, amazing. Welcome to the show. Thanks so much for taking the time to come and speak with us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here. This is going to be...
Yeah, and you're joining from all across the world, from the land down under.
Yeah.
So great to have you here. And, huge shout out to Maddie Lansdowne, who's a friend of both of ours. He's been on the show lots. He's connected us and he's been raving about you and your work for so many years. And I'm grateful that he finally connected us so we could have you on today's episode and learn from you.
Yeah. I've heard so much about you as well. Like when we first met, I felt like I already knew you.
Yeah, right. It's so funny how that happens, especially in like the virtual online space. And yeah, it's always amazing how deeply we can connect right away. So I know everybody listening, you're going to love this episode. And I think, Bronte, what I love to do to start these episodes, I know I read a little bit about your background, your bio, what you've been through, obviously what you've overcome, but would love to hear it straight from you. You know, what has your journey into health and healing looked like? What got you into obviously doing this amazing work that you're doing today?
Yeah. So I think like most people, I thought that I was healthy and probably maybe compared to the average person I was. Like I grew up in the country. My mom grew fruit and vegetables and we ate meat and 3 veg and didn't have packaged foods. My mum baked everything. So I grew up like that. So I think that I already had a strong constitution. However, there was a lot of stress throughout my childhood and then into my adulthood as well. So that sort of caused more stress in my adulthood because of how it was set up in my childhood. Then fast forward so in my 20s, I had quite a wild life, I should say, and wasn't so kind to my body. Like a lot of young people, we think that we're invincible, and so we go out and party, and I was quite the partier, but had this like undercurrent of stuff that I was running away from my childhood. And then so when I got to my early 30s, I had a really intense relationship that the breakup lasted 12 months. And at the end of that breakup, I started not feeling quite right. There was something just wasn't right. I felt my eyesight was off. I was hungry all the time. I was getting heart palpitations. And I thought something's up here. I need to go and get things checked out. And so then I found out that I had an overactive thyroid. So when I look back at the lab results, knowing what I know now, I still have all of those lab results. I definitely had Graves, but they didn't diagnose me with that initially. They diagnosed me with hypothyroidism. Anyway, so I went on medication. I went and seek some holistic support as well. And 7 months later, I was off my meds. And I thought, that's it. I didn't really think much of it. Still didn't know what a thyroid was. It was never explained to me, but I was just like, oh, it's done. Then fast forward 3 years after that, I had another really stressful period, over like maybe 6 month stressful period. And then started getting these weird symptoms again. And so I went back to the doctor. I thought I had a heart condition and was getting that tested. And they ran bloods and said, yeah, look, you've got Graves' disease, and sent me off to the endocrinologist. When I sat in the endocrinologist's office, still no one explained to me what my thyroid was, what it did, and how important it actually was. They just went straight
Wow.
into their treatment options, and all of those sounded really scary to me. So it was either have my thyroid removed, have radioactive iodine, which would essentially shut down the thyroid gland. And both of those options, I would need to be on medication for the rest of my life. And they assured me that the medication was, you know, almost the same as what your body would make. However, it's still made in a lab. And then I said, well, what happens if I stay on the antithyroid medication? And they said, look, there's risks with that as well. So all of these three options just didn't sound appealing to me. I left that endocrinologist office very, very inconsolably upset. And they said, you've got 6 weeks to decide what you want to do. When they gave me the piece of paper of all the warnings about the radioactive iodine, I don't remember all of the bullet points that were on there, but I remember two of them, which really stood out to me and were huge red flags. And that was, I couldn't sleep in the same bed as my partner for 2 weeks. And I couldn't be within 3 meters of a pregnant lady because it could cause risk to her that she could actually have a miscarriage because of the radioactive therapy. But however,
Wow.
that radioactive pill went into my body and not theirs. So I'm a risk to them. So then I was like, then how is this affecting me? And so I didn't want to choose any of these options. So I was like, what do I do? Like, I have these three options, but I don't want any of them. I spoke to a friend who was a research scientist, nothing to do with thyroid. But she, had done a lot of her own research around health, and she suggested that I change my diet and go paleo. I didn't know what that was. I just thought, she told me about it years prior, and I thought, oh yeah, it's just some fad diet, paleo, schmaleo, whatever, like you hear people do all these like lemon diet, Atkins diet, this diet, that diet. And I had never had weight issues. So having been on some kind of quote unquote diet just was like, whatever, Trevor kind of thing for me. But when you're backed into a corner, you will grab at anything. You will try almost anything to try and get yourself out of the pickle that you're in. And so I had phone calls with this friend every couple of days initially, just to talk all about the ins and outs of paleo diet. And so that first day when I left the hospital, I went home, cleaned out my pantry, went straight down to the supermarket, and I was all in. Fast forward 6 weeks later, I went back to the endo, and they were like, okay, so what have you decided? And I was like, well, I don't want to choose any of the options that you've presented to me. So I've created my own fourth option. And they're like, what do you mean? And I said, well, I'm going to heal myself with food. And I thought that was going to be the answer. And yes, it did help. The endocrinologist told me that I was crazy, but I wasn't there to prove them wrong. I was there my choices were for me, right? So then fast forward 3 months later, all my labs came back and all my antibodies had gone back down. They were still high, but they had been over 1,300 and had gone down to low 200s in a short period of time.
Wow.
And so the endocrinologist was not even interested about what I was doing. They just said, I'm lucky. But anyway, so I then had this idea that, okay, food has such a huge influence over our health, and that is correct. But when it comes to a chronic health condition, it's not the only thing. So through my own healing journey, this is what led me to become a naturopath, because I wanted to teach other women that there are other options out there, that you can heal holistically. And what I learned through my own journey is that it's not all about the physical. So yes, what you do, because you are a physical being, but you are also more than a physical being. So you do need to include the physical aspects of healing. So your diet and your movement and your stress management and your sleep and your toxin load and infections and all of that. is included in the physical aspects of healing. However, what I learned through my journey with having high stress and having a lot of trauma that I hadn't processed from my childhood was that needed to be included as well, because I would have my antibodies go up and down with stress and and then I started to unpack the stuff within my emotional body. I started to look at the mindset as well, because I initially on my journey, I thought it was really freaking hard, and it was. But me thinking that it was hard was making it harder. So I started to really look into my mindset, like the stories that I was telling myself. How could I make this journey more easeful for myself by unpacking these belief systems that I have back here about, changing my diet? But it went much deeper than that. It went into this title that I wear, that I have this thyroid condition. That's disempowering within itself, because that speaks volumes to your body. What do I actually believe about health? What do I actually believe about so many things in my life, about my relationship with myself? You can unpack and go really, really deep as to your belief systems. What is my belief system even around God? Because there's a spiritual aspect to us as well. So, and that's taken years, and it's still unraveling. This is the journey of life and evolution and self-actualization, right? But each time I unpack another aspect of it, the upgrades are so freeing,
Yeah.
So that's what I found on my journey, is the more and more that I move through this and really assess who am I as a person. It's just been a liberating journey. And so that's what I like to teach my patients as well, is that, when you are confronted with a health condition, it's confronting and it's scary. And, often the first story is like, why is this happening to me? But, you hear this phrase that it's happening for you, but it actually really is. I would not be the person I am today had I had not developed a thyroid condition years ago. And it would not have led me to my passion. So I'm actually super grateful for it. And many of my patients, once they work with me, they begin to see it as well. They don't see it as this heavy weight that they have to carry. It's like such a beautiful invitation to go deep into yourself and a journey back down into your heart. And like I said, the self-actualization piece, and that is so freaking self-empowering when you start to understand all of that. And so then when you start to stand back into your own power, that's a gift that you would never give back. And all because you develop some kind of health condition that you get to unpack and you get to heal. And the whole thing is that the body is always healing. People have this belief that I'm sick. When they get a cough or a cold, they think that they're sick, but that is actually the aspect of the body healing. You were sick before you even knew that you were sick. There was an imbalance already happening before you had the symptoms. And when the symptoms show up, that is the aspect of the body going through its healing process. The healing process doesn't complete until the triggers have stopped, right? And that means the emotional triggers as well. So really the root cause happens in the emotional body. So going back to my story, there was a lot of trauma in my childhood where I felt very disempowered, where I felt like I didn't have a voice, where I wasn't able to be seen and heard. And I think a lot of people can relate to this. And that's not to be the victim. These are the things that give us our strength, these are the tools that are given to us, even though they're like, it can seem shitty at the time that you have traumatic things that happen to you and you don't have the tools back then when you're a child, or you don't have the people to witness you or to support you and hold you through it, because maybe your parents didn't have those tools. And that's not to blame them, but this is the gifts that we are given in life. Even the challenge, I see the challenges as gifts.
So powerful. Yeah, it's incredible. Thank you so much for sharing all that, Bronte. Wow. Just there's so many things I want to pause you, because there's so many things I want to pull out of that and what you shared. And I think, I'm just feeling the listeners here with us. And I think so many women can really relate to that piece of like having a medical challenge and going to the doctor and being presented with, number one, like not actually any explanation or any help around like what's actually happening with your body. And number two, being presented with these solutions, these treatments that all feel icky, right? That all feel like, this isn't right. And I know so many women, especially as we get older, in the medical system, just so easily fall victim to that and believe that there's no other options. Like if the doctor says this is the only option to cure my cancer or the only option to cure my thyroid, right? Or quote unquote cure, probably just like mask it, right? For years with medication or therapy or radioactive. Oh my goodness. But I love this message that you're sharing, right? I just want to pull that out, like that there's always another option. There's always another option. You're just talking to the wrong people, right? Or you either need to find it yourself like you did, or, speak to other people, join holistic Facebook groups. Like there's so many options for healing. Our body wants to heal. And, this mindset that you have, I am very much in the same boat, really understanding when we truly understand the power and capabilities of our body, we can see disease or challenges as like that warning sign or that gift of helping us get back to balance. And, kind of navigating through that is definitely challenging. And at the same time, can be such a gift and reward. I know for me, just even hearing you share that, I'm like thinking about, my challenges with sugar, my sugar addiction. I'm like, I wouldn't change that for the world. Like, I'm so grateful for my story and the challenges that I've had because it helps me help others now, right? Having overcome that, I've learned it's been a catalyst to learn so much and do so much of my own healing that I never even thought would have happened, right? Around that. So really just so many beautiful things there, Bronte. And I think, what I would love to go with next, you mentioned earlier on when you went into the doctor's office, like nobody explained to you what your thyroid was, why it was important, what it did. So can you share the answers to that? For anybody out there who's listening, that's like, I hear the word thyroid. I get the basic test done. We'll talk about testing in a minute, but, I think even for myself, I would love to learn more about the thyroid. I mean, I'm continuing to learn and the role that it plays in our body, why it is important, why it's something we do need to care for, and we can go from there.
Yeah. So your thyroid is located below your Adam's apple at the front of your neck. It's a butterfly-shaped gland. And the hormones that it produces are involved in every cellular function in your body. So it's very, very important. So for the thyroid to be removed as a treatment option just seems crazy. Absolutely crazy is the only way I could explain it. It just doesn't make sense. Like if you have a headache, you don't chop your head off, right? So it just doesn't make sense to take the thyroid out because it's so important. So it's involved in regulating your heartbeat, your body temperature, your hormones, your fetal development and brain development, your digestion, your metabolism. So the symptoms that you can experience, so obviously there is an underactive thyroid and there's an overactive thyroid. So when the person is underactive, hypothyroidism, or the autoimmune aspect of that is Hashimoto's, it means that the body is running really slowly. It's underactive. And so that means that the systems are running slowly. So that person may be more sensitive to cold or feeling cold quite often. Their bowels may be slow. They could be experiencing constipation. They could have heavy bleeds. Really fatigued, depression. Whereas on the overactive side, which is hyperthyroidism, and the autoimmune aspect of overactive thyroid is Graves' disease. And so that person's system is running overactive. It's running really fast. So then they may feel anxious. They may be sensitive to the heat, feeling hot all of the time. They may have loose and quick bowels. They can experience their periods may stop. So they usually sit on opposite ends. Sometimes you can have a crossover. So the person who's underactive may be experiencing weight gain, and generally when someone is overactive, they can be experiencing weight loss, but this is not always the case. So for me, yes, I lost a lot of weight. I looked quite sick, looked very underweight, but I've always been a light frame anyway. but then I was just even lighter. My hair was falling out. That's another thing as well I didn't mention. Like your hair can thin. The outside third of the eyebrow often falls out, and this is for both under and active when it comes to the hair symptoms. But for me, I didn't really have the anxiety. I more so had the depression. Yeah. So yeah, because it is involved in every cellular function within your system, in your body, then you're definitely going to notice it when your thyroid goes out. It just feels like, oh my God, there's just all these things going on. I feel like a lot of people say that they just feel really fatigued and they feel like they just can't cope. They can't cope mentally and emotionally. They just feel like they have a very, very limited capacity. And then it will show up in other ways, like I said, with digestion, bloating, constipation, fast bowels. And because it's affecting mood, that seems to, like, when your mood is off, like if you've ever had depression or anxiety, that just filters into every area of your life, your relationships, your work, your ability to concentrate, your ability to experience joy. You can often feel numb to the world, like it just filters into everything, right? And just then you feel quite miserable. So I think that is quite a big part of it, but also the fatigue. It's shit.
Yeah.
It's really shit to have a thyroid.
Sounds like an important gland. Sounds like something that's important to pay attention to, right? And I'm curious, this may be a rabbit hole and we're totally welcome to go there, but like, what do you believe or what have you seen as like, why are so many women having problems with their thyroid, right? Like, why is this such a rising sort of, we'll call it an epidemic? I know I'm hearing about it left, right, and center. I mean, obviously there's other things that are on the rise, heart disease and gut damage and all this stuff, but specifically with the thyroid, it seems like so many women nowadays are struggling with either hyper or hypo, or some sort of challenge with their thyroid. Why do you think that is?
What I feel that it is, there's many layers to this. So if we talk about it from a toxin level, so the thyroid is very, very sensitive to toxins. So when you think about it, when a woman gets ready in the morning before she goes to work or goes out, she is putting so many different chemicals on her skin. So her skincare regime, her makeup, her hair products, maybe if she paints her nails, body products, perfume, deodorant. Most people are brushing with fluoride toothpaste. The thyroid gland is very sensitive to fluoride. That needs to be avoided from your toothpaste and your water. So if you think of just the toxin load, that has such an impact. And so women are more exposed to toxins than men because of makeup and face care and things like that. Whereas men will just sort of, have a shower, put some gel in their hair, brush their teeth, put some deodorant and maybe cologne on and walk out the door. They're not putting as many chemicals on their skin. The other thing is with modern lifestyle, women now are expected to be the mother, the homemaker, and carry a full-time job or at least a part-time job. So they're wearing all these different hats. So they're the taxi driver, they're the doctor for the kids, they're the chef, they're the house cleaner, they're all of these things, and then all of the hats that they need to wear when they're going to work. So it's like they're carrying a couple of full-time jobs. Whereas typically, I'm not saying this is always the case, there are so many men that do help out around the house, but children they do gravitate more to the mother for things, right? But anyway, so generally the husband will go to work and come home and the house is clean, his clothes are washed, the food is cooked for him, right? So he doesn't have to carry so many different hats. And then that causes stress as well. So even like when a woman becomes a mother, when she's going through pregnancy, there's all the hormonal fluctuations that happen that can affect the thyroid. Then when the child is born, there's the sleep deprivation, which causes high stress, right, for the individual. And so then the thyroid is sensitive to that as well. And the hormone fluctuations continue, postpartum, even up to 12 months, maybe even longer for some people. So, so there's that as well. So, and then there is the aspect that men don't tend to go and get their health checked as often as women do. So they don't go and get their bloods done. Men could go years without even looking at their labs, whereas women tend to go probably at least once or twice a year. And so I guess it's been picked up more in women. But there's a lot of different aspects to that. The thyroid is very sensitive to stress, and women tend to these days have more stress.
Yeah, I would so agree with that. Yeah, I see that majorly on the rise, like the amount that we're taking on just because we can do everything. I personally think this is like, one of the major downfalls of the whole feminist movement is like, just because we can do everything that a man can do doesn't mean we should be doing everything. And we've taken all that on. Like I can have a high powered, job and do all the things that I was doing before. And it's just like, the stuff, right, that we carry, the people pleasing tendencies that we have. I know that you mentioned, and obviously I'm love to dive deeper into that maybe a bit later, but like the energetic emotional components, right, that contribute to autoimmune disease and just changes in our body. And yeah, so multifaceted. I'm curious, I have to ask, obviously, with the theme of this podcast, like what role does nutrition and processed food and specifically sugar play in thyroid health?
Yeah. So yeah, what you consume into your body is going to have an effect on your cellular health, right? And then if you speak about, so I will get to the sugar. So your thyroid requires a lot of different nutrients to function effectively. And so we want to be getting that from food more so than supplements. The thing is, a lot of people aren't eating nutrient-dense food. Their life is so fast. They're going for quick foods. Maybe they're going for takeout, or they're eating a lot of carbohydrates. They're eating nutrient-deficient food, nutrient-deficient meals. We won't even go into the farming practices, but that's a big part of why food is nutrient-deficient. But essentially, people they'll eat a pasta that has, I don't know, some tomato and maybe 2 veg, maybe 1 meat, but there's not a lot of nutrients in that. And then they're carb loading. So they're not getting the nutrients that they require. That life is too fast. They're not preparing their food effectively, right? So they're not looking into nutrient density. They're eating to stop the hunger as opposed to eating to nourish the body and feed themselves on a cellular level. So the body requires all these different nutrients to run all of the functions. So you need to be mindful that you are eating nutrient-dense meals. Then it's looking into how are you eating and what are you eating? A lot of people, they're burning the candle at both ends because, phones and screen time and Netflix and all of that and lights on. So they're stimulating their cortisol. They're staying up late. They're going to bed and not sleeping well because their melatonin production is all skew-iff because their circadian rhythm's out. And then so they might not sleep through the night, or they don't get enough sleep, so they're waking up tired. Then when they're waking up tired, their stress levels are high. They're going to reach for quick fuel source foods, so they will tend to have cravings for carbohydrates and sugars more so than, fruits and vegetables. So they're reaching for that throughout the day because they're tired. So they want that quick fuel source. And so that's why a lot of people often are reaching for the sugars. This also disrupts your gut biome. So your gut biome is also going to drive what you are going to crave. Depending on what you're eating, right? But this all can stem from a disrupted circadian rhythm, right? And so that can influence what we're reaching to eat. So then the person who is reaching for the coffee and reaching for the sugar, they're increasing their stress hormones, and the sugar is increasing their insulin spikes. This can put the thyroid out of balance. So the stress can put the thyroid out of balance, and the spike in insulin can put the thyroid out of balance. And then when the thyroid's out of balance, all the other things can go out of balance. So your bowels, your hormones, so much. There's so much interplay in all of that. So we're looking at your circadian rhythm, that disrupting what you're choosing to eat, disrupting your gut biome, disrupting your insulin and blood sugar regulation. Yeah. So it all sort of intertwines into each other. It's like this domino and interplay between all of it.
Yeah. It's like it's all connected. Who would have thought? Who would have known? Thank you for sharing that. I think, I think it's helpful to be reminded, even if we all know that, right? Obviously, overdosing on sugar, that, one of the big toxic pieces that happens when we're having, unhealthy blood sugar and blood sugar dysregulation, right, is not only gut damage, but also just hormonal damage all over the body, right? Our reproductive hormones, our thyroid hormones, like everything really is affected.
And inflammation.
Big contributor, right, to inflammation, which obviously affects every system in the body. Like nothing is, and I love that match that you shared, right? Like nothing is working on its own in our body, right? And I think that's how our medical system takes it, right? So you have a problem with your thyroid or you have a problem with your gut, like they're only looking at that area and then only looking at like what they can prescribe you to like make the symptoms go away, right? The whole Band-Aid approach. But that's not how it works, right? Everything is so intertwined, and this is where it gets so complicated. Mm-hmm. And why it's so beautiful to have a team of practitioners, naturopath being one, and energy workers and somatic therapists. And like when we're doing some of the energy emotional work, but also doing the physical work and all these pieces, this is what it means to really holistically heal. And I know you talked about pregnancy earlier, and everybody knows I'm pregnant. And at the time of releasing this episode, I'm sure I still will be pregnant. And this is one of the things that thankfully I'm working on with my naturopath. Like I just did a whole blood panel because I know, and actually this is my next question for you leading into this is I did the test that my like medical doctor, so air quotes, would do for free for me, right? I went and did the blood work that the government will cover for me. And of course it's like just minimal. It's the like, I forget what it is they test, right? Is it T4 or anyway, they test one of the markers and it's very limited in terms of like actually giving you a whole picture of what's going on with your body. So then I went and did extra testing with my naturopath to get a deeper level, even tested my vitamin D levels and my, cholesterol. It's been a while since I did blood work. So, I'm very aware that like my body's going through a lot right now growing a human. And I'm grateful to say like my first trimester blood work was like bang on, looked great. My blood sugars looked great. My thyroid looked great. But I'm going to test it again. Like you mentioned, and I love that reminder. Anyone else who's pregnant, this is just really valid for me right now, is like that afterbirth piece. I'm going to do my numbers again, probably towards like middle-ish of my third trimester, just to keep an eye. And then about 6 weeks postpartum, I'll be doing them again, to really see like what's going on the inside on a deeper level. So all that personal stuff aside, let's talk about testing, because I think this is where it can get really confusing. And, I have my own beliefs and rants that I could do about like our medical system and the tests that we do. I mean, it's great that we can do some of them for free. But, how do we actually begin to work, with the medical system? I know not everybody can afford to work with a naturopath. I know here in Canada, it's not covered. I'm pretty sure in US it's not covered, under our overarching medical. So, how do we work with that, and what tests would you recommend, people advocate for, and how do they go about doing that?
Yeah. So like you mentioned, oftentimes they're only looking at one marker. And so I like to use the analogy. It's like you reading the first page or the first chapter of a novel and thinking you know what the whole story's about, and you don't, right? And so TSH is never enough. So TSH, you need the TSH, you need T4 and T3. That is called a thyroid function test. But it's also important to be looking at reverse T3 and thyroid antibodies. And then you want to look at the thyroid cofactors. So what are some of the main nutrients that are required to produce thyroid hormones? So you want to be looking at iron, selenium, zinc. You want to look at zinc to copper ratio as well. So they're sort of the main ones that you will be testing there. Oh, sorry, is it iodine? Left out a really important one. Iodine's really
I was like, what? That one's important. Don't forget iodine. Yeah. I'm taking a lot of that right now. My prenatal vitamins.
Yeah.
And my diet, of course.
Yes. So it's important to look at that whole picture. So how is the thyroid functioning? Is there any autoimmune activity as far as looking at the antibodies? Oftentimes antibodies are present before the thyroid function becomes out of balance. And then you want to look at, okay, so when I'm looking at that panel of how is the thyroid functioning, so maybe the person has a low T4, or maybe they have a low T3, or maybe they have low on both of those. I want to be looking at why. Is the T3 low because it's going off into reverse T3, or is the T3 low because the person is not converting enough T4 to T3 because they have nutrient deficiencies in the nutrients that are required to convert T4 to T3? So I want to be looking at that as well. So there's a lot to look at there. So they're the tests that you want to be looking for.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I can already imagine as you're explaining this and talking, like the importance of, I mean, I'm such an advocate for having someone like you, right? Like a naturopath or a functional medical doctor that can actually explain this stuff to you and will actually look at those things, right? Your medical, even if you ran these tests with a traditional, like a medical doctor, you're not going to get the analysis that you were just doing for us. You're not going to get the full picture of like, okay, why is this showing up, right? You're going to get, okay, here's a problem, here's a pill. Not everybody, not all doctors, not throwing them all under the rug, of course, but they just don't have the time to spend with you, right? Versus an hour-long visit with a naturopath.
They're also not trained in that way. A lot of them may not even understand what are the nutrients required for each step of thyroid hormone production and conversion.
Right.
And because, they're looking at, is that a balance? Is it not? Do I prescribe a pill for the ill or not? And so TSH is actually generally the last marker to go out of balance if someone has a thyroid imbalance. But it's the first thing that's
probably why they check that one, right? They wait to see if you're like really sick, and then they'll do something about it or try to help you, right?
And they'll give you,
as opposed to catching it early.
Yeah. So that's just the model that they follow. And it's not that your GP is a bad person. That's how they are trained. It's how they are educated. They think that they are doing the right thing, but it's because the system that they were educated under didn't teach them how this all actually works, how the thyroid actually works. So I don't want people to be out there hating their doctors. The doctors are trying to do the right thing.
Of course.
But it's like, if you have an issue, then go to the person who understands the issue more effectively,
Yeah. And I mean, of course, in an ideal world, let's not develop an issue, right? And I know, I'm privileged to say that, I'm keeping an eye on things, and I have disposable income to pay for extra tasks and make sure that I'm ahead of anything, right? And keeping an eye on those markers so that I don't let it get to a point where it's maybe developed into a more serious problem. But I know that that's not always easy, right? And that's not always the case, especially with, I don't know what you've seen in your practice, but I see so many women completely disembodied, completely disconnected from their bodies. They don't even know that they're tired, right? Or they don't even know, in a way, right? I don't even know that I'm feeling a symptom because I don't feel. And it's just kind of the norm to wake up tired, drink a bunch of coffee, eat some sugary cereal, go to work, come home, totally flat out on the couch, watch Netflix, go to bed, the cycle is normal. So it's hard to sometimes notice like, whoa, something's off. I should go and get something checked. Right. And often it can be scary because we don't sometimes want to know, like, intuitively we know maybe something's wrong and we don't want to do anything about it because that means we're going to have to do some work. Right. And we're going to actually have to do some healing. And especially when we understand the holistic components to disease development. And okay, now I'm going to have to get serious about healing some of my traumas or some of these emotional wounds that I carry. And that can be daunting. So just some major compassion for anyone out there. How often would you recommend, like if somebody is not noticing specifically any of the symptoms that you mentioned earlier, obviously if those symptoms are showing up, go get like thorough testing. But if somebody's not, how often would you recommend, doing this panel and checking your thyroid?
I would say at least once a year. Go and get all your thorough labs done once a year just to check up on everything, just to make sure that, your body is in balance or, what is out of balance. What are what I like to call nurture spots? Where are your nurture spots? Mm-hmm. Do you actually have low iron at the moment or low iodine, or is your blood sugar out of balance, or are your lipids out of balance? Like check your heart rate, check your blood pressure, like just do it once a year and just see, okay, not that are you sick, but just are there some things that are out of balance that you just need to nurture those aspects of yourself a little bit more. But one thing I will say though, is when you do get your labs done, there is such a big difference between the regular lab ranges and your functional optimal ranges. There's a big difference. So the lab ranges are the average of all the people that go and get their bloods done at that lab. The thing is, most people who are getting their bloods done are people who aren't of optimal health. So you want to be having someone assess it from an optimal health perspective. So even if you just book one appointment, you invest once a year to go and see a naturopath to look at your labs with you. And work out some sort of thing that maybe you will need to get more than one appointment depending on, what's out of balance and what's present for you. But even if that was your health checkup that you invested in. Yeah. That's what I think.
Yeah, that's so powerful.
Your doctor, because the doctor will be like, your vitamin D, for example, as long as it's over 50, they deem you okay. You are so deficient if your vitamin D is under 100. So,
Right.
50 is really extremely deficient in vitamin D. And it's very, very
Yeah.
important that you have adequate vitamin D levels. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the-
I was just like scanning around looking for my blood work. I was like, I thought I had it here on my desk somewhere because I just did it a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And my vitamin D was definitely over 100. But I'm so glad that you brought that up as we're talking about labs, because I think that's something that I learned literally just a year or two ago, and it just blew my mind.
Yeah.
And I kind of think of it as like the ranges that they'll give you on your blood work is like you're not gonna die range. Like you're not in super danger yet range. That's not optimal health range. That's like, if your vitamin D is above 50, you're not going to die. If it's below 50, it's dire and we need to do something about it. But we don't want to wait until things are dire on that upper end or whatever they're considering as like normal. And that average of a bunch of sick people is not really where we want to shoot for as a goal, right?
No.
So I'm so glad that you mentioned that. Like those ranges are total BS a lot of the times. And it's really like you're not going to die range until you get to the upper limit, but it's not your optimally healthy range. They're just trying to keep us like, they're trying to keep us sick. But anyway.
Yeah, like even with the thyroid, for example, TSH, like, they'll deem you okay if your TSH is 4 or 5 or 6 and they think that you're still fine, but the person is like on the floor because they've like got no fuel in the tank. They're so freaking tired. But you're fine because your TSH is 4. No.
Yeah.
Your TSH needs to be between 1 and 2. And even for some people, when they're getting closer to that 2, they're feeling quite fatigued. So each person's individual set point is going to be different when it comes to TSH. Some people might be just under the 1, so they might be 0.8 or something, but they feel pretty good. So, it's just something to keep an eye on and something to also understand. Like, go to somebody who understands the optimal ranges for your labs.
Right.
Like, it's really important. Your health is everything. And for the people listening, if you've ever had a health challenge, it leaks into every area of your life. Like, life is just not as joyful when you are having some kind of health issue to deal with. Yeah. And so your health really is your wealth. You've heard that saying so many times over the years. So invest there. Stop getting your nails done. Stop paying for Netflix. Stop wasting money in all these other avenues and put it into your health so that you have a life to, the energy and the health to enjoy your life.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for that message. I think that's so potent, because I think we can all honestly call ourselves out on like where I know so many clients and so many women I work with are like, I can't afford this, or I can't afford to buy, good quality meat, or I can't afford to buy, organic stuff, or
they buy their lunch every day,
cook my own
coffee every day.
Exactly. Right. And then we look at the actual bill and it's like how much they're spending on like really fancy, expensive makeup or a purse or the daily $6 Starbucks. Right. Like, and all that really adds up. Right. All the things that we're prioritizing over ourselves. Yeah. Yeah. It's backwards. And yes, in respect, I mean, if we really are going all in on our health, that might be thousands of dollars a year that most people don't have to spend, but it doesn't have to be that huge of a thing. Like you said, it's going to be like investing just, $200 for your naturopath appointment once a year, right? And doing your best to buy real food instead of eating at McDonald's when you can, right? Like it's not an all or nothing. I think there's so many things that we can change, but a big part of that, I love that you called that out, right? Is like, look at actually where you're spending your money and notice like, are you actually putting your money and your time and energy into what you really value? And a lot of people, unfortunately, are just not valuing their health until something bad happens. And I can think recently of a really close family member of mine that just had major colon cancer scare. And it wasn't until he got that diagnosis that he got super serious about changing everything in his life. And one of the things that I was very happy to educate him about was all the endocrine disruptors and chemicals in the products that he was using. They were the type of people that always had one of those things plugged into their, all the outlets in their house had the smelly perfume things plugged in. And just the makeup and the shampoos and the chemicals. Like every time I go to their house, like I couldn't breathe. So I'm grateful he's gotten rid of all of that now from his house, which is fantastic. But like the moral of that story is, you know, don't wait for something like that to have to wake you up, right? Like you can start making those changes now. Will be a lot easier than when you get diagnosed with something. Yeah. Right. And start paying attention to getting the chemicals out of your home, getting the toxins off your skin, getting them out of, you know, your food and what you're putting in your body. And just that will have such a drastic, and the mental toxins as well, the energetic, emotional toxins that we carry. Obviously, you mentioned, as we both are so passionate about, right? Working through, letting go the layers of the stuff that's really keeping our nervous system bogged down. And yeah, so much here. Bronte, this has been amazing. Is there anything final that we didn't touch on that you really want to leave people with as we wrap things up?
I think it is to that point about the emotional aspects of healing. So yes, like I said in the beginning, is that the physical aspects are very important, but it's not the only thing that is going to get your health back into balance. If you are not doing the mindset work and unpacking what is in your subconscious, what are the shitty stories that are not true, that are not supporting your healing path, are they're essentially being roadblocks that you need to assess, that you need to look at, that you need to reset. And also, what are the challenging events that you've encountered in your life that you haven't processed because maybe you were too young and you didn't have the tools back then, or maybe life just got so busy. Like say a woman got children, she's going through a divorce and she has to go work full time, and she's just trying to like carry this huge load, and she's just like, okay, well, I'm just going to look at the trauma from my marriage another time, like, and just pop it in the cupboard kind of thing. And that sits there for years and years and years. That creates such a weight, so we need to really be assessing where is our energy going, what are the things that haven't been processed, and start to include that and get the support that you need to be able to include that. Because for many of us, unpacking the challenges that we've encountered in our life, or the traumas, if you want to label it that way, it can be quite a big task and a scary one to start to unpack, and you really do need the support initially. So, but that's part of us, we are mind, body, spirit. And so you need all of us, the whole self needs to be included in that healing process.
Yeah. So beautiful. Yes. Yeah. So powerful, Bronte. This has been incredible. Thank you for sharing with us. If anyone who's listening is really resonating with what you're sharing, struggling with their thyroid, how can they come find you, work with you, and find more about what you're doing and sharing online?
So I'm mostly on Instagram, brontemay.naturopath. You can find me on Facebook as well, but I'm generally hanging out on Instagram. Yeah.
Great. So I'll make sure, of course, to have the links to come and connect with you below. And I'm sure if anyone has any questions or just wants to share some love for this episode to Bronte, please go and follow her, connect with her. I love everything that you're sharing online and the work that you're doing. So thank you for everything that you're doing in the world, Bronte, and for coming on the show today. And this has been incredible.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been great.
Yay. Yes. And thank you everyone for tuning into another episode. I hope this was really helpful. And of course, if you know anyone struggling with thyroid issues, please share this episode, help us spread it around. And as always, if you haven't yet, come leave a 5-star review. It really helps support the podcast, support the show, and it helps this episode reach even more women who need it. All right, everyone, we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you for tuning in to another episode. If you're loving what we talked about today, please remember to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone you love. And if you're ready to dive deeper into discovering your root causes and patterns that are keeping you hooked on sugar, be sure to check out our brand new free workshop series that will help you kick emotional eating for good. Find the link to download this free series and other amazing resources in the show notes below.